Educator, where I talk about anything and everything that relates to the ELA classroom. I'm your host, Joni Tui, a small town high school English teacher and graduate student. Today's question of the day is: does social media ruin childhood? Dun dun dun. So, full disclosure, I'm a millennial. Yes, one of those annoying people who fancies that their childhood was simply better than yours, Gen Z, but there's actually some truth to that. I, like others of my generation, did not grow up with a smartphone and therefore did not grow up with social media buzzing in my pocket. I got my first phone when I was 19, an LG Shine to be specific, one of the last of my friend group to bite the bullet and learn how to T9 text. And I was 22 when I got my first smartphone, a fully grown adult, prefrontal cortex developed. I was ready. Now, let's contrast that with Gen Z. Gen Z, according to Google's AI overview, officially spans from 1997 to 2012. Now, if you haven't read social psychologist Jonathan Haidt's The Anxious Generation, you should, because he talks specifically about the rise of the mental health crisis that exists right now in conjunction with smartphones and social media. The first iPhone was released in 2007, so the youngest of Gen Z was 10. And of course, Facebook's official launch was in 2004, a year after MySpace. Remember MySpace? Whereas Instagram wasn't released until 2010, Snapchat in 2011, Vine in 2013, and TikTok in 2016. Social media and its presence in our pockets was available for prepubescent Gen Z. Gen Zers? I don't know. How do you say that? Anyway, so what's the problem? Is there a problem? Remember, the question is, does social media ruin childhood? Now, it didn't ruin mine because it didn't exist. So, Gen Z is the first generation that grew up and went through puberty with social media. The guinea pigs. We've all seen the real millennials are the last generation that could dance like they meant it at the bar without fear of being recorded. And I mean, it's true. I definitely danced like no one was recording me. And my parents couldn't track me because, like, I took my mom's Nokia brick with me when I drove anywhere far, and I called to say, I made it. I didn't even know that thing could text, and that was it. One of the arguments out there is that kids are just growing up too fast these days. I find that a little bit ironic thinking about things like, I don't know, 16-year-olds passing themselves as 18-year-olds so they could enlist in World War II, whereas kids these days, let me get my cane here. Like, they're tracked. Parents know where they are, even if they don't have phones. Those things parents shove in their kids' shoes, Apple AirTags, right? I mean, I just heard an anecdote about an 18-year-old being scared to sneak into the bar because Mommy Dearest would know. Where's the risk taking, the freedom? Ain't no kid I know gonna give up his childhood to join a war with the adults, but freelance journalist Rebecca Sweat discusses this in her article titled, Whatever Happened to Childhood? I'll post all my resources for you to check out. Don't worry. Sweat says childhood is becoming a thing of the past. Citing professor of child study David Elkind, hopefully I'm saying that right, as saying our society is compressing childhood more and more while children are not children for very long. The reasons include sexualized content via the internet and, you guessed it, social media. I mean, I remember obsessing over certain pictures in 17 magazine, her thighs, her skin, her lips. But the sheer mass and availability of social media, it's inescapable. Whereas my mom only let me buy like 2 17 magazines in my whole youth. Thank you, Mom. I understand now. Like Sweat's article says, we used to have to go out of our way to find this kind of content aimed at teens, but now it's everywhere. And it's not just sexualized content, but violence too. The article doesn't discuss the social media aspect of this, but think about all the violence that's out there. You literally can witness people dying. I mean, YouTube, which came out in 2005, and Amanda Todd, she posted that suicide note in 2012. That was earth shattering for me. And I was an adult. I was 24. The impact of that kind of a video on me as a prepubescent kid who had suicidal thoughts at a very young age. And I mean, people argue against this idyllic rose tinted glasses nostalgic view of the past, like Jacoba Urist's 2014 post on Today titled, Hey Parents, Stop Romanticizing Your 1970s Summer, which, I mean, now that happens with our 1990s summers, right? But one of the statements is that bad things were still happening, but we didn't see it on the news every night. But isn't that kind of part of the dream, to maybe not know it all or be bombarded of it all? And if you choose not to, then there's this, intense fear of missing out. I mean, even as a teacher in my classroom, I experience FOMO. I suck at using my phone and my Apple Watch. I really do. It's kind of a problem. I like to use it as a bit of a bragging point, but it causes problems. It literally causes marital friction, you guys, and not the good kind. Okay, no, gross. This is an adult show, apparently. But I don't like being tied to it. I never have. After I got my first smartphone, I actually disconnected and went without a phone for about 6 months while I was in university, because I hated how obsessed everyone was with it. I saw people crossing the street with their phone in their face, like stupid deaths over distractibility, and like opening the phone while I'm in the conversation with somebody else. Opening the phone. Okay, I'm still back. I'm still back there, back in my university days. But you know what I mean? Like, I find it completely rude when people are interrupt a conversation with somebody else to check and be like, "Oh, hold on, let me just make sure this isn't more important than you." Um, and like, because I've had this anti-phone personality from the start, I'm not on social media a lot. So I'm not seeing the TikToks. Okay, I don't even go on TikTok at all. I downloaded it because my intern made fun of me, but I literally never check it. Ask her. I do watch Instagram Reels, and of course, I can get sucked in like any other person to an hour of the doom scroll. But generally, I don't. So I miss out on stuff like that really inappropriate Hug to a video. I didn't see it. Students started making the noise, and I had to eavesdrop on a staff room conversation to figure out that this was even something that needed a reprimand. And like, that's frustrating to me. Is it really my job to know the content that's out there? No, I could never be ahead of the curve. Yet I still had that feeling of like, oh crap, something happened that everyone else knows about and I don't. And then I feel dumb and old. But again, I keep saying this. That's me as an adult, not somebody who's going through puberty, who wants to impress my peers, fit in, etc. Okay, I do still want those things, but not as much. I mean, if you need a good cry, go read Madison's story on ESPN, a beautiful young athlete who chose to take her own life, who compared her life to the filtered, perfect lives of others. This article cites a Girl Scout survey stating that 74% of girls agreed that other girls tried to make themselves look cooler than they are on social networking sites. So, not only are teens experiencing FOMO to know the latest funny video or saying, because we know they quote them all the time, but to keep up with the Joneses in terms of looking as though they're living their best life, even if they don't feel it. Forbes magazine author Ahmed Chowdhury posted an article back in 2014 that cites a University of Pittsburgh School of Medicine study on the effects of social media habits on moods of users. And yeah, you can probably guess, it's huge. I quote, the research determined that the more time young adults use social media, the more likely they are to be depressed. And algorithms, right? They get to know us and they show us the content that we like. For me, it's a lot of teacher parodies and cat videos. But if students are on negative content, imagine the impact of that negativity. I mean, it's proven. The data is there. It does affect them and contribute to depression. And then there's the social aspect of social media, which, yes, can boost self esteem, yay, sharing creativity, all of that. Um, I who boast about how much I don't care, and I mean, I'm a rare poster, but I still feel that rush when I look at my phone and like, oh man, I got 5 likes. And yes, 5 likes for one pickup is pretty good for me when my total never exceeds 20. The Guardian has a 2015 post that cites YouGov stating that of 4,700 teens across the world, a fifth of those who had experienced cyberbullying said it had made them consider suicide. And more than half said being taunted online was worse than being bullied in person. Now, I've heard some arguments that social media doesn't call bullying real life. Bullying exists regardless. And I mean, sure, I can agree with that. But if it's worse, question mark, doesn't that make it worse? I mean, don't quote me on that. And I mean, the common rebuttal is just teach digital citizenship schools. You've got this. And I mean, I agree in the importance of digital citizenship. Once I went through all of John Green's Navigating Digital Information on Crash course with my grade 8 ELA class, which was really interesting and relevant in our deepfake and fake news era, would recommend. I do think teaching about the harms of social media is about as helpful as being taught the harms of digitally modified models to be impossibly thin. As a young adult, this was helpful to me, and yes, it did make me think about whether this or that photo was modified or not. But it still didn't stop the teen in me from obsessing over body image. I mean, teens know that their phones are bad for them. They do. Yet, they also don't think that they should be taken away. In a national news desk interview this year titled, Is Social Media Having a Big Tobacco Moment? In light of the upcoming UK banning social media for people under 16, a teenager states that when she's bored, she'll now have to quote unquote stare at a wall, which is actually great because boredom is important, young teen. Embrace it. Dr. Mark McDonald, who's interviewed on the clip, shares my sentiment by saying, well, yeah, if you take ice cream away from a toddler, they'll also scream and cry. I mean, phones are addictive. He relates them to gambling. They're pretty and sleek, and they make fun noises, and they get to know us and what we like. What is perhaps most interesting is that he doesn't believe that these laws that will ban kids from under 16 from social media will actually work. What he does think will work is schools enforcing bans on phones so that they get a full school's day worth of classes, which in my school would be about 5 hours of time, apart from their social media. And I mean, it's societal, right? Dr. McDonald points out it's not like parents are forcing a smoke into their toddler or teen's hands, but a phone? Phones are seen as vital, as the breath we breathe. And maybe they are as handy as we think they are, but social media? Why do we think they need that? Now, there are studies, such as the American Psychological Association's 2023 Health Advisory on Social Media Use in Adolescents, that state that social media is not inherently harmful. It's context specific. It has to do with who the teen is, when they hit puberty, etc. It's a case by case basis. And we've all seen this, right? Some teens do seem to be unaffected and resist the machine. And yet, the study also finds that teens can get stuck in harmful and hateful algorithms, and also they interfere with sleep. The recommendation is teens get off their phones an hour before bedtime. Who's doing that? What adult is doing that? But perhaps their best argument is for at risk and isolated youth who find solace and connection in others, which could actually improve their psychological health. However, this podcast isn't asking if all digital communication is sent from Beelzebub. It's about social media. Teens could still connect via WhatsApp, Marco Polo, good old fashioned texting. Why does it have to be social media? Because while there is the potential for social media to be positive for some teens, there's a whole schwack of data that says it's terrible. Reem et al. In 2019 conducted a study on social media use for students who have major depressive disorders. They did not allow them to use social media for 24 hours and then let them use it for 20 minutes while tracking their cortisol and salivary alpha amylase levels. So that's the stress hormone and then a biomarker that's associated with the fight or flight response. And guess what? They both increased, leading the researchers to conclude that social media use can act as a psychosocial stressor for depressed teens. They also give some quick stats, being that 95% of adolescents own a smartphone, and then they use those phones for 6 to 9 hours a day on social media. Social media usage is being increasingly linked to poor self esteem, poor mood, bad sleep habits. They come to school so tired. They even potentially link social media use to the recent stark increase in adolescent suicide. This immediately made me think of those predators who scam kids into sending a nude and then hack their phones and threaten to send them to their family and friends if they don't send money. Financial sextortion. According to the RCMP, the increase of financial sextortion is a public safety crisis, with young boys being affected in 87% of the cases. UK teen Jordan Buddha is one such case who was targeted, where 22 and 20-year-old Nigerian scammers pretended to be a pretty girl sending him sexual pictures. These two men are also responsible for the suicide of a 15-year-old American boy and a 14-year-old Canadian girl. A BBC article about this, published in 2024, states that since 2022, sextortion cases have doubled, with at least 27 boys killing themselves in those 2 years. It's disgusting. So, do we live in a safer world than we did in the 90s? Sure, kids are endlessly tracked and monitored, but was this a problem? I mean, yes, I definitely was on some weird chat rooms as a kid. And once I had a camera, I definitely sent pictures, not nudes, but still sexual, to strangers I didn't know, which honestly only reinforces my thoughts on how vulnerable kids are. I came from a happy, healthy, typical family, but I still struggle with depression, suicidal thoughts, and I wanted so, so badly for people to think I was attractive. And so I sent some questionable photos, but I didn't have the device all the time. This was in my parents' office in front of a desktop computer. Like, it was really bold of me because one of my sisters or parents could have come around the corner. Kids will do bad stuff on the internet regardless, right? Hence the digital literacy. But to have access to it all the time. And I find it really interesting that Dr. McDonald doesn't believe in the social media ban for kids under 16. Montreal Gazette's Henry North published an article stating that Canada's very own Bill C-34 could come into effect as early as September. But the article doesn't seem convinced it will work very well either, citing that the language is subtle and allows for flexibility. However, it is a start. The Angus Reid Institute states that 75% of Canadian parents are on board with this policy, which seems to contrast the phones being pushed into adolescent hands. Yet, as I said before, it's not really phones that are the problem, it's social media. So, is social media ruining childhood? Yes, 100 times yes. Just because it isn't harmful to some, hey, smoking doesn't cause cancer in everyone, right? And is even potentially good for others. It does not outweigh the cost. Do I think that Canada's Bill C-34 will solve the problem? Heck no. This change needs to be societal, and schools do need to be a place where this is discussed and enforced. But we're also not the parents. I 100% support students not having access to their phones during the hours that we as educators have them, and to teach them about digital literacy and the harms of social media for both kids and their parents. And I mean, people are coming at this from all angles and coming to the same conclusions. Gen Z has unfortunately bore the brunt of the social media experiment, and the data shows it. But we as humans do not actually want this to continue. We can see the damage. We make fun of it all the time on the very devices that demand our attention. I choose to believe that we will find a balance, that we will hold childhood to be something sacred that needs protecting. And heck, at the very least, my own little Gen Alphas that you may have heard in the background of this podcast have a circle of friends with us millennial adults vouching to keep social media out of their hands for the foreseeable future.
1, 2,
Well,
3,
I've hit my time.
4.
Time for me to sign off.